Hi, my name is Rebecca and welcome to Yarn and Pajamas. Today is another episode of Hooked on Murder. Hooked on Murder is essentially just a crochet and chat where I tell you a story of a true murder. And today I am working on this doily, putting it on this hoop. I have been working on it for a while, and as you can tell, I do not have much left to go, so hopefully I can hurry up and get this thing done because it is so huge and so massive. It's just in my way all the time. So grab yourself something nice to drink. I'm drinking pink lemonade today, some Country Time sugar-free pink lemonade. And grab yourself a project to work on, and we are going to travel all the way up to New York, Bethlehem, New York, and go back to the year 2004, and we're going to talk about the murder of Peter Porco. Okay, so let me see. I'll grab my crochet hook here. I do have me some notes because this one is an intricate little story here. So I'm going to have to try to keep my glasses on so I can see my notes. So on November the 15th, 2004, Peter Porco was found deceased at the bottom of his stairs. He had suffered massive injuries from the train. He had suffered massive injuries to his head and face. At the time that the police were at the Porco's residence, they were trying to clear the scene to make it safe for law enforcement personnel and paramedics to come in. And that's when they discovered Peter's wife, Joan, in the upstairs master bedroom in the bed, and she had been bludgeoned and was disfigured, but she was actually still alive. So paramedics started attending to her wounds. She had massive wounds to her face and her head, and police started to question Joan because they were actually amazed that she could still communicate with them with head nods, because she was following directions that the paramedics were giving her, like raise your right arm or don't move your legs, that sort of communication. So the police officer that arrived on the scene knew the Porcos. He had investigated a burglary at their house before, so he knew the family, and he asked if Joan knew who her attacker was, and she nodded her head yes. And so then he asked if it was her son Jonathan, who was 23 at the time. She shook her head no, and he asked if it was Christopher, who was 21 years old at the time, and she shook her head yes. So the police started their investigation into Christopher right then. So Joan was attended to and taken out of the house, and detectives and crime scene investigators started investigating the scene. And they said that it looked like Peter had gotten up out of the bed after he sustained these mortal wounds that was done with an axe. They found the axe on the bedroom floor of the master bedroom, and it was an axe that belonged to the family. Peter had gotten up out of bed and went to the bathroom. They could tell this by the trail of the blood stains that he left behind. They said it looked like he stood in front of the mirror for a short amount of time due to the blood loss that was on the sink basin. And then he went downstairs. They said that they followed the trail of blood down a short hallway and into the kitchen, where it says that he looked like he was trying to do like mundane things, like he opened the dishwasher and looked like he was maybe attempting to put away dishes. They also suspect that he was attempting to make his lunch. So they surmised from this that Peter was like in severe shock and didn't recognize that he was mortally wounded, and was going about like his normal daily routine. He left the kitchen and went back and was going up the stairs, and that's where he passed away. So as the crime scene investigators are looking around, they see that he had also went outside. Like, he had opened the door, there was blood drops along the front patio, and that was it. So there was no forced entry. There was a house key hanging in the door, the lock of the door, and it was a spare house key that was kept in a flower pot outside of the home. The alarm had been disabled, and the front panel had been smashed. The keypad had been smashed, but there was a box down in the basement that recorded like the goings on of the keypads of the burglar system, and it logged that the master code was used to disarm the burglar system. So even though the keypad was destroyed, the evidence of what was used to turn it off was still there. So they know that there was no forced entry. They know that the burglar alarm had been disarmed by the code, and they know that Joan had stated or had acknowledged that it was her son Christopher who had done this to her. So that's where the investigators started investigating Christopher's whereabouts for the night of the murder. Christopher was in college at the time at, I think it was called Rochester University. It's in New York. And at the time, he said that he was asleep in the lounge of his dorm room. So the investigators started questioning the people, that his frat brothers that were there, and they stated that Christopher was not there. He was not in the lounge. He was not asleep on one of the couches. The investigators started pulling security footage from around the campus, and they see his yellow Jeep Wrangler leaving at like 10:30 p.m. that night. And they catch the Wrangler on some more CC footage from a health facility showing that he was driving in the direction of his parents' home. So they catch the CC footage on both the healthcare facility and the school's cameras that he was returning at around, I think, 8:30 the next morning. Now, during this time, they found a neighbor of the Porcos who stated that he was leaving for work around 4 a.m. that morning, and he saw Christopher's yellow Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway. So there was plenty of circumstantial evidence linking Christopher to the residence during the time of the attacks. So the police started looking for a motive, like why would Christopher murder his parents in such a vicious way? So Christopher was having some pretty severe financial problems, even though he was so young. He had went to Hudson Valley Community College, where he was just not doing very well, and he apparently failed out. Well, the parents found out about it via the school, and he just, basically lied to them and told them that it was just, a miscommunication, that he was actually doing fine in school, that everything was okay. So the family, believed him and went about their business. But the police detective who had questioned Joan about who it was that had attacked her, he had investigated a series of robberies that the Porcos had experienced a few years before, and it was determined that Christopher was the one who had burglarized the home. He had stolen several laptops through that time period from his family and sold them on eBay. So the police actually did travel to California at one point to retrieve one of the stolen laptops that he had sold through eBay. And that was another thing. eBay had froze his accounts, his and his brother Jonathan's accounts, because both of them had the same address listed on their account. So eBay had froze both of their accounts due to fraudulent activity that Christopher was perpetrating. He was selling things to people and then taking their money and not shipping anything out. So like, he didn't have these items that he was selling. So at one point, there was communications to some of the buyers on eBay that looked like they were coming from Jonathan about Christopher, that the items couldn't be located because Christopher had died, and so there was nothing that they could do about it because they didn't have the items. Eventually, you know, eBay caught on to this little scam and like shut everything down, so he didn't have a way to gain money that way. Now Jonathan at this time was in the Navy, I believe, and he was stationed in like South Carolina, so he wasn't anywhere near the home at the time of the murders. Well, Christopher, after all of the burglaries of his family home, goes like on this vacation to like Europe or something, like England, and while he's away, his father finds out about his being kicked out of school due to the bad grades, and he emails his father and is like, hey, everything's fine, I'm getting in contact with my professors, I'm going to find out what's going on and it'll be okay. So when he comes back, he actually does enroll into the Rochester University, and he used fake transcripts from the Hudson Valley Community College, and he had told his family that the school was paying for his tuition because the professor had misplaced his final exam, and because of that and the stress that they had caused him, they were paying his tuition fees and that everything was good. Whereas in reality, Christopher had forged loan documents with his father's name, with Peter's name, to pay for tuition and to also pay for the new Jeep Wrangler that he had. Well, Peter found out about this and was livid. He was trying to call Christopher. Christopher was ignoring his phone calls, and so he started emailing Christopher. And he just straight up tells Christopher, you either get into contact with me so we can discuss this, or I will be forced to file affidavits about forgery to restore my credit, because he was just like destroying his dad's credit. And it was right after these emails that the attack happened on the Porco family. So they arrest Christopher and he goes to trial. And a lot of family and friends think that Christopher is innocent. They do not believe that he is guilty of this. His brother stands beside of him. His former employer, who was a vet, was standing beside of him. Family and friends came together to actually pay for his lawyer fees and everything. So at this point in time, Joan says that she doesn't remember the attack. She says that she doesn't even remember the detective asking her questions, but the prosecutor used witnesses, the paramedics, as witnesses, because there was like a room full of people when Joan was being questioned. And they said that she was following directions, that she was aware. So she was not just like willy-nilly like shaking her head. Like she was like conscious and aware of like what was going on. And at one point the detective said when he first walked into the room that Joan looked at him and done the motion of like, come here. Like she couldn't speak, and all she could do was like listen and follow commands, and she nodded yes and no to like questions that was asked of her. But she says that she doesn't remember the attack or the questioning, which is, you know, understandable because the lady was probably in shock. Well, the defense team presented a doctor who said that Joan was able to follow commands and follow directions, but that the part of the brain that controls memory was affected during the attack, and that just because she was following the directions and looked like she was coherent doesn't mean that she actually was. So that was one of the defense's main witnesses. And also the defense put on the stand the veterinarian that Christopher worked for, stating, you know, like just what a good person he was. But the prosecution used it to their benefit because of his highly specialized training at the vet's office, being able to clean up well after surgeries, because no physical evidence was found, no blood evidence, nothing like that was found in his Jeep or on his person for the prosecution to use. He had no physical evidence. But the prosecution stated that because of his specialized training, he would know the precautions to take to keep the blood off of him, and also how to clean up a bloody mess afterwards. There was also a fingerprint that was unaccounted for. It was on the phone box. Let's wait, this train. It was on the phone box outside. The phone line had been cut after the attack on the Porcos had happened. So they found an unidentified fingerprint. It was not related to, it didn't belong to anyone in the Porco family, nor did it belong to anyone who worked at the phone place. So it was like unaccounted for. The defense says it is the fingerprint of the actual murderer. They think that the defense said that the key that was placed in the door was probably done by Peter when he was in shock and roaming around the house. They think that he went to let the dog out and turned off the alarm system, went outside to let the dog out, and then coming back in, mistakenly thought that he had been locked out of the house, and gets the key and puts the key in the door and goes in the house. Now, they don't have an explanation for why the keypad was destroyed, other than that maybe Mr. Porco had fallen into it. But there was no blood evidence on the keypad. Now, Mr. Porco had left blood evidence all over this house. Like, they were literally able to walk around this house and know like what he was doing at each stop that he was at. But there was no blood evidence on the key control or on the doorknob coming into the house. So the defense stated that there was no physical evidence to tie Christopher to the murder, that it was all circumstantial. So the trial goes on, and let's see. He was actually found guilty of second-degree murder, and he was also found guilty of the attempted murder of his mother. He was sentenced to 50 years to life for each count. He will have to serve a minimum of 50 years before he is eligible for parole, and he has appealed his conviction twice, but it has been rejected both times. Now, his mother and his brother do believe in his innocence. He is still in prison. What do you guys think about this? Do you think that Christopher was innocent, or do you think that there was enough circumstantial evidence to warrant that he was the person who done this? I mean, the circumstantial evidence really does point towards him. It is weird that there's no, like, blood evidence, because, like, how do you clean up that well? I mean, because it had to be a bloody scene, right? I mean, he used an axe to hack at his father and his mother. You would think that he would have some kind of blood on him. You would think that it would have gotten somewhere. But then again, you look at the evidence of there was no break-in. They knew where the hide key was. There was no evidence to suggest that Peter had disarmed the system. It looked like, in all accounts, that it was somebody who, you know, knew it. Like, Peter would have left some type of blood evidence, because he bled all over the house. But then there's that mystery fingerprint outside. Like, who could it have been? Could it have been, like, just a kid, like, playing in the yard, looking at the house? Could it have been the actual person who murdered the family? Could there be another option for who actually killed this family? This was a very hard one because of the lack of physical evidence. It's like, you would think that there would be something to tie this kid, other than the fact that he had all this financial problem. But that's a big motivator. Money is a big motivator, I've noticed, in the reason why people, you know, murder other people. It's like usually either to do with money or with jealousy, or like love gone wrong kind of stuff. So money is a big motivator, and I could see how that would be like a perfect reason, like, for this kid to want to do that. And the police theorized, because the injuries were to the head and face, that it was more of a personal, like, they just wanted to obliterate this person. Like, they just wanted to obliterate Peter and Joan, and they think that that's why it was, like, filled with rage. And they think the only person who would have that much rage built up would be Christopher, due to, you know, the father was going to go and turn him in. Like, he could do, like, some serious time for this crime. I'm sure that he was, like, really upset, because he's out here living his best life on his father's dime and having no responsibility whatsoever. Okay, guys, I got quite a bit of my ring done during this session here. So I'm pretty happy about that. I just have a little bit more to go, as you can tell. It really flew by. This was a very interesting story. It's just one of those stories, like, oh my goodness, I bet that jury had just a hard time with the decision that they made. I didn't see where how long it took them to come back with a verdict, but I could see that it would have been a difficult one for this jury. I know it would have been a difficult one if I were in that similar situation. It would, because, you know, this is the rest of this man's life. He's basically a kid, and he'll be living his life in prison, which is not a great place to be. But, you know, if he's guilty, that's where he should be. So, okay, what do you guys think about this crime? What do you guys think about Christopher, or was there a potential, you know, third party who committed this crime? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. It helps me to know that I'm doing something that you guys like, because I'm really having, it's bad to say, but a lot of fun researching these murders and coming on here and just hanging out with you guys and chit-chatting about it, and finishing some projects along the way. So if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.